Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got Reed Little back to the channel. How are you, Reed?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you for inviting me as always.
My pleasure. We are going to talk about Uriah Heep, and more specifically, the album Abominog. Let's go back to the start of the 80s. 1980, Uriah Heep brought out an album called Conquest with the lead vocalist John Sloman. That was probably at the lowest point of Uriah Heep. It didn't sell. It was critically maligned. And I think around the early 80s, Uriah Heep was kind of on the ropes, Reed. Abominable came out, I think, in 82. And
Right.
I think it's fair to say, this was the resurrection of Uriah Heep as a viable music force. They were doing successful tours in the UK, Europe, starting to break into America again and get played on American radio and MTV. Today's show, we're going to talk about the songs, the experiences, the whole package of Uriah Heep, but more specifically, I'm going to be the voice of Pete Goalby. Pete is not in the greatest of health. He is suffering Parkinson's, and I've had a long and warm correspondence with Pete via email over the last couple of years. I sent him a series of questions a little while back about the making of a Abominog, and I thought it'd be great to have a show and wrap it around his words directly as to the making of it, his thoughts on the album, and also sort of wrap it around your thoughts on the album, because I know you're a little bit of a fan. You don't mind this album at all, Brie.
No, in fact, I would definitely put it in one of my at least top five Uriah Heep albums. Now, I think it's important to establish some context with that. I did not start listening to Uriah Heep in the 70s. I didn't even start listening to Uriah Heep in the 80s. So I did not have, in the back of my mind, there wasn't something that Uriah Heep was supposed to sound like. So I actually got um, Demons and Wizards and Abominog the same day, if you can imagine that, and listen to them. And yeah, it sounds like two completely different bands. It's recorded in two completely different eras, but they're both great. But I didn't have a historical loyalty saying, oh, they shouldn't sound like this new thing. As you pointed out, it was the 80s were a very difficult transition time for a lot of bands. Legacy acts had the choice of adapt or perish. And not all of them were successful at adapting. So, in the 80s, people did not want dinosaur rock. They did not want the guys in the fringe jackets with the big droopy mustaches. People had to get with the new times. And I think Uriah Heep is one of the acts, Blue Oyster Cult being another, that actually transitioned pretty successfully. Well, Blue Oyster Cult was unable to hang on to it for very long. Then again, neither did Uriah Heep.
Yeah. Well, I think my first encounter with Uriah Heep was in the early 80s. They did a pub tour of Australia. Well, that was very successful. I bought Head First in the day and lived through it. Went back to Abominog, and from that explored the David Byron years. But look, this particular era of the Pete Goalby fronted band, I'm unashamedly is my favorite era of Uriah Heep. I've always waved the flag. Why don't we start this off? I asked this a question of Pete. How did you get the gig with Uriah Heep? Was there an audition process? Did you know any of the band members either socially or as musical acquaintances? He said, I'd never met any of the guys before, although I had met Ashley Howe, who is the producer of Abominog.
Right.
He engineered a session with me and my songs in Dublin a year or so before I was asked to audition. I actually had auditioned a year or so before, but they chose John Sloman. Ken Hensley, he's talking about, wanted me, and the other guys wanted John Sloman. It's well documented that Ken said, had they had chosen me, he would not have left the band. So I think if Ken was in this band, I don't know if Abominog would have been as AOR, Reed. That's an
Well,
interesting
that
one, isn't
is,
it?
I actually think there's an answer to that one because if anybody wants to look into this timeline, Ken Hensley actually joins Blackfoot, and Blackfoot puts out the album Siogo at just about the same time Uriah Heep puts out Abominog, and they are very similar albums. So I actually think that it would not have altered the direction of it that much, not as much as you might think.
Okay. I asked the question, what was the first memory of rehearsing playing with the band? Do you remember what songs were played or jammed? And he said, look, I remember it all. I was about to tour the USA with Trapeze. I got a call from Ashley. He said, would I like to audition again? I said I had to do the Trapeze tour for 6 weeks in the US, but if they had not found a singer by that time I got back, I would be interested, yes. Whilst I was away, Heap auditioned 84 singers. One of the singers was David Coverdale. I had no idea that all this was going on at the time. When I got back, I assumed they were all sorted. A couple of weeks later, I got a call from Ashley. He said, do you want this fucking job or not? So I went down to London to audition. Mick, Lee, John and Bob and me in a tiny rehearsal room. I stepped up to the mic and said, so guys, I can sing all the old material, no problem, but why don't we do something from scratch? I have a couple of songs we should work on together. So I ran through the first song on an acoustic guitar and showed the guys how it went. They played around with it for a while, then it all kicked off. Well, it sounded wonderful with these fantastic players. The song, by the way, was called Too Scared to Run. It was a marriage made in heaven. Wow, just wow. We then played around with another one of my tunes. Again, it was fantastic. What a sound with the Hammond organ blasting out, chasing shadows. They brought the songs to life. They really did. I thought this is going to be special, loving it. I think we then did a Heap song. It might have been Gypsy, I think. Then we played around with some ideas from the guys. And here's me thinking, yeah, baby, this really works. We're all loving doing this. It sounded huge, us all together. I think we then went to the pub. It was never mentioned that I had got the job. We just rehearsed for days. It was just taken for granted it worked. I finally said, well, am I in it? To Ridge Farm Studios with a bunch of songs. Jerry Bron, who's the manager of Uriah Heep, hated it all. He thought it was too heavy. I think he and Ashley pushed us into the 80s vibe. This was great for me and my voice. So it all started to fall into place. Ashley had been collecting possible songs to cover, and they wanted an album as soon as possible. So we cracked on Ashley. Ashley was steering the ship. I think advising on song choices, he had a very clear vision of what we should be doing, and we agreed. The band decided that all internally written songs would be credited to all members, no matter what, who wrote what. We're all contributing, so it seemed fair. We did the same split on Head First. It was a joint effort. I think it's fair to say that Pete Goalby had a voice that was made for the 80s, wasn't it? And it had that cut through in radio rock.
I think about Pete Goalby as being an 80s style singer. He sounds like, no, he doesn't sound exactly like them, but he's in the same tonal area as Joe Lynn Turner or Donnie Iris or Steve Perry from Journey. You know, these guys that were like the uber 80s singers, and the material that they have him singing on really works for his voice.
In Australia, there's a guy called John Farnham, who's like a deity in these parts of the world. And I've always said Pete Goalby sings like John Farnham. Big voice, huge voice. And I really think Pete's voice lifts this material. You know, deservedly, it got a lot of accolades. Do you think this album, is sort of new wave of British heavy metal adjacent, or something a little bit different?
No, I think there is exactly zero new wave of British heavy metal in it. And it always irritates me to see that reference. I was looking through the Wikipedia article, and people throw that out, and it's got to be just because of the time frame. You know, it came out in 1982, but it doesn't sound anything like the new wave of British heavy metal. In fact, if you drop off of heavy metal, it just sounds like new wave in parts because it's got so much synthesizer. It's got so much sequenced synthesizer as the rhythm section. It's got a completely different guitar sound. It's got a completely different vocal sound. The types of I have to say I have no idea who Ashley Howe is or what other projects he ever worked on, but he does an amazing production job with this album. There's so much ear candy on it. It doesn't have that gated drum sound that you'd get with from Phil Collins I think in 1983, but there's a lot of reverb on Pete Goalby's voice. He does these things where you'll hear a lot of reverb on the guitar, and the guitar trail will move from the right to the left through the stereo space. So there really is just a lot of production in the truest sense of the word. And it sounds amazing, even though I think it's funny that Pete calls out when they were practicing, they had Hammond organ, because to my ear, the only song that has real Hammond on it is probably Too Scared to Run. And everything else is synthesizer, maybe pretending to be Hammond organ. There is so much synthesizer on this album. But there is zero new wave of British heavy metal. And I think one of the main characteristics, I was thinking back to 1982, the moment you put keyboards on something, it was no longer heavy metal. This was the album where metal was guitar, bass, vocal, and drums. And if you put keyboards on it, no longer metal. So it was just hard rock.
The wonderful keyboard work of John Sinclair, I interviewed him last year, and he really downplays his contribution to this album. And I'm going, mate, you know, you're like the mad scientist, you're like the wizard, your musicology and those all little interweave synth lines and classical flourishes just add so much texture to this album. He really downplays it. And I think John Sinclair is such a big part of the Uriah Heep, the modern Uriah Heep in the 80s sound of Abominog and Head First. Why don't we talk about some songs? So I'll give you Pete's take on the songs and maybe throw it over to you what you think. So in respect to Too Scared to Run, personally, I love this song. It's a cracker of an opener. It's really bang, Heep's back. Pete said, so proud, it really turned into a great song. I always saw this as a Thin Lizzy sounding record, and that's how it turned out.
Okay. Interesting comment. Maybe, yeah, if you get up around Renegade era, Thin Lizzy might have some similarities. So this has come up a few times on recent shows, like when we were talking about Motorhead's Another Perfect Day. When bands do a big transition, they often start off with a song that kind of tries to reassure people. So Too Scared to Run has that Hammond organ sound. It has a very big, bombastic guitar part to it. It's maybe the closest classic sounding Uriah Heep style song on the album. So they put that right up front. And I agree with you. It's a great opening. The other thing that you get that's classic Heep is backing vocals. Every member of the band is credited with backing vocals, and there are choirs of backing vocals all over this album. And another thing, I'll save it for another song, but there's another thing that strikes me every time I listen to this album. But let's see if it comes up on another song before I bring it up.
Yeah, I can get the Lizzy comparisons because there's a lot of energy. I'd even say look, I get about the Renegade and the album that Lizzy did with Sykes. There's that little bit of that energy that, you know, Too Scared to Run wouldn't be out of place.
Thunder and Lightning, sure.
Yeah, but I think I've seen some clips of this being played live, and it is definitely the centerpiece of the Heep, song set. It sounds great. Chasing Shadows. Pete says, John Sinclair made it sound so important. The intro is perfect. His keyboard ideas were a great part of it. Again, just the wizardry makes it a really interesting song. What do you think of this one?
I love. Well, I think the whole side one of the album is very strong. I also like Chasing Shadows. I think it's interesting the way they sequence it so that the verse of the song is not as heavy as the chorus. So it is very keyboard led, and then when they go into the chorus, it ramps up and the chorus is really intense. So it provides some sonic contrast to Too Scared to Run, which is very Too Scared to Run is like in your face for the entire song, whereas this song has a lot more light and shade to it. But yes, Sinclair, I think honestly, Sinclair is the rhythmic bed of this entire album. I would say even more than Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake. And Daisley and Kerslake were a proven rhythm section. Those guys were aces.
Absolutely solid, those two. I love the chugga chugga guitar in this, like da 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 da. Yeah, it's got a real interesting rhythmic arrangement in this song, and they really ramp up the vocals. So I've always thought that Uriah Heep were one of those first bands that used more than one or two or three singers in a heavy metal or hard rock band environment. Look, we could do this as a separate show, but I really think that Queen were listening to Heep because, like where you go very heavy, very humble, look at the age. That's 1969. I'm sure that they had some influence on a lot of folks as to how melodic rock should sound. But Chasing Shadows really ramps that up. It's melodic. It's just totally amped up. Now, the next song, Bob Daisley hates this one apparently. So Pete says,
I was really surprised to hear that.
Bob hated it. He refused to play bass on it. Too poppy, he said. So John invented the bass riff on keyboards, which really made the song heavier, I think. And Bob does mention this in his book, For Fact's Sake. So I like this song. I think it's kind of slightly new wavy too.
It's got so many keyboards. In fact, the only thing that keeps it from sounding exactly like Gary Newman coming out at almost exactly the same time is Mick Box's guitar. So this is when I'll bring it up. It's so interesting to me on this album, Mick Box is constantly abusing the whammy bar on his guitar. Now, you go back to the 70s, I think of him as being more of a Les Paul style player, more doing vibrato with his hand. But on this song, the very first notes you hear from the guitar are and he's just wanking the hell out of it. And that's the one you hear this reverb trail that starts over on the right side and goes over to the left, which I think is a really cool trick. But for this entire album, Bob is so much whammy bar. Jeff Beck never abused his whammy bar this much. There's so much whammy on it. And 1982 was the year that the Floyd Rose locking tremolo system came out. So I really wonder if he had like acquired a Floyd Rose equipped guitar or something, but he is just doing that the entire album. And I never think of that on his work from the 70s. So.
Yeah, I don't quite know what you were talking about there, but it sounded good. I'm not a guitar techie, guys. So, but yeah, look, Russ Ballard's song.
Yeah, Russ, and a good one.
He's the hit maker, isn't he? You look at Russ Ballard, and he was just on a winning streak with like in the late 70s, mid 80s. So many artists were just, it was like gold, wasn't it, for Russ?
Yeah, most of them were minor hits, but yeah, they did pretty well. He had one, oh, it's escaping me. He was only ever really able, I think, to do one hit on his own. So he mostly had success with other people writing songs. I can't believe that I'm blanking out on that song. I should have looked it up. But.
Well, of course, Argent, he had some major hits there. But look, he was definitely the hit writer. I know you say minor, but in Europe, huge. some great songs. Okay, next one, Hot Night in a Cold Town. Pete says, a class song, a class arrangement, very posh indeed. I remember John was playing around with the piano intro in the studio. He had just had a call telling him his grandmother had passed away. Ashley, the producer's then wife, came into the studio and said to John, can't you jazz it up a bit? Whoops, again.
It's not one of my favorites, but I do like it. The part that sticks out most in my mind after listening to it is actually just an electric piano stab, just dit, 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 dit. And again, that provides the rhythmic bed for this entire song. It's kind of a slice of life story. It reminds me of this whole genre. I used to think of them as Cinemax Thriller of the Week songs. There were a bunch of bands doing this material in the 80s. Even like Kiss had Thrills in the Night, or the guy who did Maniac for Flashdance. I'm blanking on his name too. Man, today's just going to be an old man day. I cannot remember stuff. But it's a good track. I don't think it's as good as the first three, but it's still a good song.
I love the enunciation of the lyric, hot night. It's like just the emphasis on hot night. And Goalby has a lot of sort of drama in a small town. A lot of drama.
He's a very dramatic singer.
That's the thing about the singer. You might have an average lyric or an average song, but he makes it next level with his the way his tone and the way he's enunciating the lyrics, and he puts out his bag of tricks in this song.
Right. Makes
it compelling. Next one, Running All Night with the Lion. I think this is just solid meat and potatoes heap. This to me is like British rock at its best. Pete says this is a very good song brought to us by John Sinclair from his previous band Lion. I remember that. I love the guitar riff and the bass line and Bobby's, bubbling bass. What do you think of this one?
I have to be honest, it's my least favorite song on the album. And I don't like the chorus of it specifically. There's something about his enunciation on when he sings with the lion I don't like. But I love Mick Box's playing on it. And kind of like what I was saying earlier, there are so many layers. Every one of these songs has at least half a dozen keyboard layers, at least half a dozen guitar layers, at least half a dozen vocal tracks, and yet it all sounds good. It's like the 80s was when producers really figured out how to layer sounds in productions and still have them sound good. And Mick Box is just on fire for this entire song. He's got overdubs and solos, and it's just wonderful work. This, I think, is my favorite performances, not just this song, but this album has my favorite performances from Mick Box. He's just amazing on this album.
I think the hero of this, I'll have a different take. I think it's Bobby and Lee Kerslake, like the bottom end. They're really in the pocket, and there's a bit of a groove to this song. It just sort of motors along. I like it. Yeah. Anyway, that's the last song on side one. So pretty strong first 5 songs, isn't it?
It is. And again, I can understand how, well, we haven't talked about the album art. So let's just say if you were like an old school hippie music guy, if you love Demons and Wizards and The Magician's Birthday, I can see how you would not be happy with this very 80s sounding album. And this may be, if you think about anything that makes the 80s music sound like what it is, other than the gated drums, because it doesn't have the gated drum sound, this album has it. But I think all of that works, and I think it's all fantastic. But we have to talk about the cover art, which doesn't work. It's not fantastic, and it really makes you expect something that the album does not provide.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 takes on this. So I when I interviewed Bob Daisley, I brought up the Abominog album, and he goes, "Yeah." He was a little bit puzzled. He goes, "Yeah, that's a bit of a strange one, really, isn't it?" And I got the sort of impression that he was a little bit puzzled as to how this album cover eventuated. But Pete Goalby says the cover was down to Bob. Really, he had come with the metal background with Lee, so they loved it. But we're looking back, it confused people into thinking we were just a metal band, and really there was far more to that lineup, far more. So two slightly different takes. I'm not quite sure who came up with the album cover. Maybe one of our viewers can chime in and let us know. But I don't like it at all, and I think it's a little bit of a trope. It does deceive the listener. To me, it looks like Venom, or one of those black metal bands that you're going to be listening to something completely evil, and yeah. So, hey, can I talk about, before we go into the side two, I'd like to talk about what Pete says about the recording process. So,
Sure.
he said it wasn't a long time. Maybe it took 4 weeks. Once we had decided on the songs, we were going to use it all, went pretty smoothly. The way we recorded was as follows. We would all play along as normal, but only the drums were being recorded. Then we had the drums recorded. That was Lee done drum-wise. Then we would record Bob playing along with the drum track. Oh, I would have put a guide vocal on so everyone knew where we were in the song. Then John would start to layer the keyboards one by one. He and Ashley were full of ideas, a great pair together. Then when all the keyboards were recorded, enter Mick doing all the rhythm guitars. Then Mick would do all the power chords and what I call the jangly guitars. Then we would all be involved in the backing vocals, which was a lot of fun because there was always someone bursting out laughing. I would have loved to see hear the outtakes of that. Then it was my time for lead vocals. My voice now is in great shape as I've been doing backing vocals for a few days. I think Mick did his guitar solos last thing to go on. Yes, that's correct, as I had gone home for the weekend, having finished my bit. Monday morning, Mick picked me up from the railway station. He had a cassette of the finished songs. There were only rough mixes. Ashley had not worked his production magic yet, but my God, first song Mick played in the car, Jesus, I thought, what a monster. Too scared to run. I loved it all. So exciting. It really was. Happy days, as Mick would say. I think Ashley took about 4 days to mix the record. No, that's wrong. Jerry Bron kept telling him to mix some of the tracks again. This was because Jerry owned the studio. We were being charged by the day, so the longer it took, the more money we owed Jerry for the recording time. In all, with all the false starts in Ridge Farm, we spent more than £100,000. Wow, that's a lot of money, Reed, in those days.
That's the scam back in the day, having your, it's a monopoly, right? If your manager also owns the recording studio.
Yep. So there you go, layered from the bottom end up. And it's a beautiful sounding album. For that matter, Head First sounds good too.
I haven't listened to Head First in a long time. I need to re-listen to that one.
It's a great album. All right, let's go to side two. So side two, that's The Way That It Is. This was the single. Talking of class, just listen to me singing my heart out for Ashley. It's all been said so many times. Should have been a massive hit. Loved singing this. So this is where they had a bit of MTV airplay. Had a video clip where they're all on bikes or something. It's a bit cheesy. What do you think of this song?
So I like it, but I'm a little confused by, let me restate that. I'm not confused by them using it as the first single. I don't love this song. I think that it's very middle of the road, which is why it was chosen to be the single. It's not too fast. It's not too slow. It's not too heavy. It's not too light. It's designed for mass consumption. And it went to number 25 on the rock chart. It did not chart at all on the mainstream Hot 100. So it was a hit, but it wasn't a crossover hit. It wasn't a pop song. And I really think that they should have picked different singles than what they released, because they released The Way That It Is, and they released the Russ Ballard song On the Rebound as the singles. And I think that they should have, now this is, 43 years later, hindsight. The recipe that was successful for all of the bands in the 1980s was you release a rocker first, and then you release a ballad. And they should have released Too Scared to Run to get people's attention, and then released Prisoner to bring in the ladies, and that could have been a crossover like pop hit. And The Way That It Is was still too rock, I think, to make it as a pop song. So it was a hit, but it wasn't a mainstream hit.
Yeah, I agree. I think Too Scared to Run would have been should have been a single. And but hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? We don't know what the circumstances are.
Yeah.
Prisoner. Pete says, another killer song, perfect vehicle for me. The string arrangement, I love John in his element. John, the mad scientist behind the keyboard.
Yeah. John was a very humble guy. I love that interview. Everyone should go watch that interview if you haven't watched it.
Absolutely. And he just downplays it, his contribution. He goes, oh, look, I was just, it seemed like I get the feel that he felt he was like an imposter, had kind of an imposter syndrome. What am I doing in this band? But his contributions to this bloody album should not be underestimated. But,
I completely agree.
Yeah. What do you think of this song?
So I think it's good. It's the true ballad of the album, but that makes it weird to me that they did not release it as a single. Because as a deep track, I don't know. Well, for one thing, I think this album is hard to market because it's not heavy metal enough to sell to the metal kids. It's too hard rock to sell to the pop fans. There are too many guitars to sell to the new wave fans. So they're really going after the people who were into Foreigner and Journey. And for that, you want the ballad, but you need it out where people can hear it, not as a deep album track. So I think it's a good song, but it baffles me that they did not float it as a single, especially now consider that both of their singles were cover tunes. Why not release original material from the band as your singles?
Yeah, it's got the trademark Heep harmonies where the singer would say, I'm just a prisoner. There's always like an echo with the harmonies of Uriah Heep, where the singer will say something and then just a nanosecond later the whole band will repeat the lyric line. Now I've been listening to you, you're sort of turning me around. I'm thinking this should have been a single before that's the way that it is. I think this is a really catchy song, but it's regarded as a deep cut, isn't it?
Yeah, because you had to have bought the album. And I have to think that even people that listened to That's the Way That It Is and went, oh, this song's pretty good. When they went to the store and they're flipping through the racks and they see that album cover, they're not going to go, oh, well, maybe this isn't what I want after all. So I think they made some bad choices on this album.
Hot Persuasion. Pete says, Mick's slide guitar is great, as was all his guitar work. Throughout the record, an out-and-out rocker of the song. I love his guitar work on this song. I think it's killer. What do you think of this one?
Like this one, again, it opens with the only other sound that has a prominent organ song that has a prominent organ sound, although I don't know if it's real or synthesizer pretending to be a Hammond organ. And one thing I love about this entire album, and I mean, yeah, Mick plays great on this album, is everybody plays great on this album. Pete Goalby is amazing on this album. John Sinclair is amazing on the album. Like I said, Mick never played better. And Bob and Lee sound amazing on this. This is an album that has 5 superstars on it. And I look at it now, again, hindsight, it's all hindsight, but say they dropped some balls on this one. They could have really gone the distance, I think.
I think Pete's vocals on this particular song show a bit of grit. Shows his rock side because he's not just a balladeer. He really shows that he can do the rockers as well, and I like it. It's a little bit rough, and again, I don't think this is a single, but it's definitely I think it's regarded as a deep track, but it's definitely one of my favorite rocking songs on this album.
Yeah, I like the way the album ends. Oh, I will say also, I don't like the sequencing on the UK release where they've got the way that it is right next to Prisoner. I think that they should have put those songs in different locations because it kind of feels like the bottom drops out of the energy. It's real hard rock and then it kind of drops down and then it goes back up. And I think they could have paced it better. But I did notice that the US release had a very different track listing. When I got it on CD, it was a reissue and it had the European track listing. So I have not like made a playlist to listen to the American track listing to see if I like that better. But I do wish they had put those two songs, split them up a little bit.
Sell Your Soul. So Pete goes, extreme rock. This is us giving it everything we had. I love it when it breaks down into half time. What an anthem. Well done, everyone. So this is another song which is kind of bombastic, bit over the top. And I don't mind if you Heep go over the top. A lot of people think over the top is not good, not a good thing. I love it when Heep go over the top, and I love it. I think it's great.
I think it's a fantastic song. I would have chosen to put this song as the last track on the album because I think it's a stronger album closer than Think It Over is. It does sound like it's Frankenstein together from two different songs. The opening of it and kind of the pre-chorus, they're very, well, Black Sabbath-y, actually. They're very kind of classic heavy metal. But the main line of the song is a boogie. It's like Status Quo, or I guess I should say it's more like classic Uriah Heep. But it does feel like you've got this boogie mixed up with this classic like 70s style heavy metal track. So that provides it some sonic interest. But I wondered about the composition because it really feels Frankenstein's together to me.
Yeah. Think It Over. I'm wondering if that's a bit of a message, and that's why it was sequenced as the last song. Like, to the listener, the title of the song is Think It Over. All right, 10 songs, think it over. What do you think? You gonna play it again, or are you going to be here for the journey for the next Heep song? So maybe I'm reading into it a bit too much, but maybe there's a subliminal message. Think it over.
Maybe so. Now, it was a redo. Have you ever listened to the original version of this? I have not. Because they released it as, I think, like the A-side or B-side of a single in 1980, is what I read.
It's written by Sloman and the great late Trevor Bolder. So Pete goes, I do not know the history of this song. I thought it was just another great song that Ashley had found for us. Very powerful song, a joy to sing. I think it's a great closer, and I think it's one of the top songs on this album. I think it really fits in well. But you're not kind of sold that it's the last song?
Yeah, I think it doesn't have the impact that Sell Your Soul has. I mean, it's a good song, and I particularly like the vocal chorus on the choir. The vocals are just outstanding on this entire album, but I do think it's a stronger track listing if you reverse this song and Sell Your Soul. Because I like Extremes as the last song on an album, either for it to be like super energetic so that you leave the album going, feeling great and pumped up, or something that's super mellow so you feel like, you reintegrate into the real world after finishing your musical journey.
Yeah. Now, so that's the end of what Pete was talking about the songs, but there's a couple of things I want to bring in. there's some bonus tracks or B-sides that were on the remastered version that I want to talk to you. Tin Soldier. Boy, oh boy, Pete does a great vocal on that. Again, that's another opportunity for a single. I could imagine that going out, and that would have got some traction. That is a really good version of that song. Is it better than the original? Maybe not, but I think it sounds contemporary, and I think it would have got them some cut through.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I don't know that I've ever actually heard the original. I've heard other covers of it. So it's a song that people still bring out from time to time. But I don't know. I was okay with leaving that as a single.
Not sold on it. Not sold on it. No.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good track, but again, now that would make the 6th cover tune out of 11 songs. That's a lot. That's a lot of cover tunes.
And then there's Son of a Bitch from the EP Abominog Jr. That's okay.
Yeah.
I can understand that probably wouldn't make my cut for the album per se. So
right. And at the time you could not say that like on American television without getting in trouble. So it was pretty much by necessity relegated to a B-side. But I like that song.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's Uriah Heep Abominog. So it's great that we've got Pete's words coming out, and hopefully get some eyes on this clip, folks. Share this video, because the music does live on, and I think it's really important that it's documented, and Pete's speaking. Hear Pete's words. Thank you, Reed. Fantastic to talk to you as always, folks. Tell us what you think of Abominog, your favorite tracks. Where does it sit in the Uriah Heep discography? Tell us maybe there's another Pete Goalby song that you'd like to showcase, or write your comments. Put it down. We love reading your comments. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. We are building a community. Check out Read Little on the Contrarians, and for that matter, a stack of other shows out there in YouTube world. But one thing's for sure, Reed and I will be doing some more shows in 2025. All the best, and cheers. See ya.
Cheers, Peter.